I picked up the same hitchhiker 3 times on the drive from Moab to Monument Valley, but each time, she looked completely different. The road trip was supposed to be therapeutic. My therapist had suggested I take some time alone after the divorce, maybe drive through some national parks and clear my head. So I loaded up my Subaru with camping gear and planned a loop through Utah and Arizona. Arches, Canyonlands, Monument Valley, Grand Canyon. 2 weeks of solitude and desert sunsets. I left Moab around noon on a Tuesday in late September, taking Highway 163 south toward Monument Valley. It's a lonely stretch of road, maybe 2 hours of red rock and sagebrush with scattered ranch houses and the occasional roadside stand, perfect for thinking, which was exactly what I needed. About 30 miles south of Moab, I saw her for the first time. A woman standing beside the road near a broken-down pickup truck, thumb out, looking stranded. She appeared to be in her 20s, long black hair, wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. Nothing unusual about the scene, except for how far we were from anywhere. I pulled over because that's what you do when someone needs help in the middle of nowhere. She jogged up to the passenger window, and I rolled it down. "Car trouble?" I asked. "Yeah, radiator shot. You heading toward Kayenta?" Her voice was friendly, normal. She had a slight accent I couldn't place. Maybe Southwestern. "I can take you as far as Mexican Hat. There's a gas station there with a mechanic. That would be amazing. Thank you so much." She climbed in and buckled her seatbelt. "I'm Sarah. Ben," I said, pulling back onto the highway. We drove in comfortable silence for about 10 minutes. She stared out the window at the landscape, occasionally commenting on the rock formations or pointing out a hawk circling overhead. Normal road trip conversation. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I noticed something odd. The broken-down truck was gone. Just empty roadside where it had been parked. I told myself maybe it was farther back than I thought, or maybe someone else had already come to help. Desert distances can be deceiving. We reached Mexican Hat around 2 p.m. Sarah thanked me, said she could call for a tow truck from the gas station, and walked inside. I filled up my tank and bought a Coke, thinking that was the end of it. Just a good deed on a lonely highway. 20 minutes later, I was back on 163 heading south when I saw her again. Same woman, same location, same broken-down truck on the side of the road. But now she had short blonde hair and was wearing a red flannel shirt instead of the white t-shirt. She looked maybe 10 years older, but the face was unmistakably the same. Same bone structure, same eyes, same way of holding her shoulders. I slowed down, confused. How had she gotten back here so fast? And why did she look different? She waved me down, and despite every instinct telling me something was wrong, I pulled over. She approached the passenger window with the same jog, the same smile. "Car trouble?" I asked, testing her. "Yeah. Alternator died. You heading toward Monument Valley?" Different voice this time. Deeper. More mature. No accent. I just dropped you off in Mexican Hat 20 minutes ago." She tilted her head, looking genuinely confused. "I think you have me mixed up with someone else. I've been stuck here for about an hour." I studied her face carefully. Same eyes, same nose, same slight scar on her left cheek that I'd noticed the first time. But everything else was different. Hair color, age, clothes, voice, even her posture. "You said your name was Sarah. My name's Rebecca." She looked at me with concern. "Are you feeling all right? You look a little pale." I told her to get in, partly because I couldn't leave someone stranded and partly because I needed to figure out what was happening. As she buckled her seatbelt, I asked casually, "What kind of work do you do, Rebecca?" "I'm a nurse at the hospital in Blanding." "You? Insurance adjuster?" It was a lie, but I wanted to see how she'd respond. "That must be interesting work. Lots of travel?" Different personality entirely. The first woman had been chatty, curious about the landscape. This version was more reserved, professional. But when I checked the rearview mirror, the truck was gone again. We drove toward Bluff, and I tested her with questions. She gave consistent answers about her life as Rebecca the nurse, never contradicting herself. But she had the same habit of pointing out hawks in the sky, using the exact same phrase, "Look at that beautiful red tail." I dropped her at the trading post in Bluff, watched her go inside to use the phone, then continued south on 163. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I told myself I was overthinking it. Desert heat, stress from the divorce, maybe seeing patterns where none existed. But 30 minutes later, there she was again. This time she looked like a teenager. Same face, but younger, with curly brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a University of Utah sweatshirt and looked like she could be heading back to school after visiting family. The truck was there too. Same model, same color, in exactly the same spot where I'd first seen it. I drove past her without stopping. In my rearview mirror, I watched her watch my car disappear. She didn't wave or look upset. She just waited. But 10 miles down the road, guilt got the better of me. What if I was losing my mind? What if these were 3 different women with similar faces, and I was abandoning someone who genuinely needed help? I turned around and drove back. She was exactly where I'd left her. Car trouble? I asked through the window. Yeah, fuel pump, I think. You heading south? This voice was higher, younger, college-age inflection. What's your name? Jessica. Thanks for stopping. She got in and immediately started talking about school, her major in environmental science, how she was doing research on desert ecosystems. Completely different personality again, but she pointed out the same red-tailed hawk using the same exact phrase. Look at that beautiful red tail. This time, I was ready. Where exactly did you see it? She pointed to empty sky. No hawk anywhere. Jessica, I said carefully. Do you remember talking to me earlier today? What? No. I just met you. She looked at me like I was crazy. You're the first person to stop all afternoon. I pulled over at the next wide spot and turned to face her. In the afternoon light, I could see every detail of her face clearly. Same bone structure as Sarah and Rebecca, but the skin was smoother, younger. The scar on her left cheek was still there, but it looked fresh instead of old. How old are you? 19. Why? And you're sure you've never seen me before? She laughed nervously. Pretty sure I'd remember. Are you okay? You're asking weird questions. I studied her eyes. They were the same color as the other 2, the same shape, but they held a different expression. Sarah had looked confident, Rebecca professional, Jessica uncertain. 3 distinct personalities wearing the same face. Get out of the car, I said quietly. What? Please get out of the car. Her expression changed. The uncertainty vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. Why would I do that? Because you're not human. She smiled, and for just a moment, I saw too many teeth. What makes you think that? Same face, 3 different ages, same truck in the same spot, same phrase about the hawk when there's no hawk there. Jessica, who wasn't Jessica, unbuckled her seatbelt slowly. You're very observant, Ben. I hadn't told this version my name. What are you? I'm curious, she said, opening the passenger door. You humans are so predictable most of the time. You see someone who needs help. You stop. Basic programming. But you stopped 3 times even though you knew something was wrong. Why? I don't know. She stepped out of the car but didn't close the door. I do. Guilt. Loneliness. You're recently divorced. Driving around the desert trying to figure out who you are now. You need to feel useful. needed. Even when it's obviously a trap, the way she said it wasn't cruel, just matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather. How many others have you practiced on enough to get good at it? She leaned down to look at me through the open door. Her face was shifting subtly, features becoming less defined. Don't worry, I'm not hunting you. You were just convenient. A chance to try out some new approaches. The truck. How do you move it so fast? I don't move it. It's not real. She gestured toward the roadside where the pickup had been parked. It was gone again. Neither am I, exactly. Not the way you understand real. I stared at the empty space where the truck had been. Then, what are you? Something old that lives in the empty places between towns. Something that gets lonely and wants to understand how you work. She straightened up, and when I looked at her again, her face had settled into a new configuration, older this time. Maybe 40, with gray streaking her hair. Will I see you again? Probably not. You're not fun anymore now that you know. She started to walk away, then stopped and looked back. But Ben? Next time someone flags you down on a lonely road, maybe drive past the first time. Trust your instincts. I watched her walk into the desert, moving away from the road at a steady pace that didn't kick up dust or disturb the sagebrush. She walked like she weighed nothing at all. I drove straight to Mexican Hat and called the tribal police from the gas station payphone. I reported seeing a woman who appeared to be stranded multiple times on Highway 163, in case other drivers needed to be warned. The officer listened politely and said they'd had similar reports over the years. Always the same stretch of road, always a woman with car trouble. What do you think it is? I asked. Could be someone running a scam. Could be something else. We just advise people to be cautious and report anything unusual. I spent that night in a motel in Mexican Hat instead of camping. For the rest of the trip, I avoided Highway 163 entirely, taking the long way around through different routes. But I still think about her sometimes. Not Sarah or Rebecca or Jessica, but whatever was wearing their faces. She said she was curious about humans, wanted to understand how we work. The scary part is how well she'd figured us out. She knew exactly which face to wear, which personality to project, which words to say to make me stop. If you drive the lonely highways through the Southwest and someone flags you down for help, look carefully before you stop. Check the details. Are their clothes consistent? Do they remember what they've told you? Do they point out things that aren't there? And if something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Some things that appear stranded on desert highways aren't looking for rescue. They're looking to study you, to learn your patterns, to practice being human. The next driver might not be as lucky as I was. The next version might be perfect enough to fool someone all the way home. My cousin Alex returned to our campsite at Zion National Park with a story about meeting another hiker on the trail. But Alex had been dead for 6 months. I was camping at South Campground in early April with my girlfriend Emma, trying to process everything that had happened since the funeral. We'd driven down from Denver to hike Angel's Landing, something Alex and I had planned to do together before the accident. Emma thought it might help me get some closure. She was probably right. But grief makes you do things that don't always make sense. We set up our tent in Loop, a Site 18, just as the sun was setting behind the canyon walls. The campground was maybe half full, mostly families and a few other couples. Normal spring break crowd. Emma started dinner while I organized our gear for the morning hike. The plan was simple. Early start, tackle Angel's Landing, back by afternoon. At the visitor center earlier, a ranger had mentioned that some trails were still getting snow melt from the higher elevations. He said to watch the weather and stay on marked paths. Then he added something that seemed odd at the time. If someone offers to show you a shortcut, especially someone you don't remember meeting at the trailhead, stick to the main trail. Emma laughed and said that sounded like standard tourist advice. Don't follow strangers into the wilderness. But something about the way he said it made me think he meant something more specific. Around 10 p.m., Emma had fallen asleep in the tent and I was sitting by the dying fire, looking through photos of Alex on my phone. That's when I heard footsteps on the gravel camp road. Someone walking steadily, not trying to be quiet, heading straight toward our site. "Tyler, that really you, man?" I looked up and there was Alex, backpack on, hiking boots, wearing the same red fleece jacket he'd worn on every camping trip we'd ever taken. Same grin, same way of cocking his head when he was happy to see you. For maybe 3 seconds, my brain tried to make it make sense. Maybe the funeral was wrong. Maybe there'd been some mistake. Then reality crashed back. Alex died in February. I was at the funeral. I helped carry the casket, but there he was, 10 feet away in the glow from my headlamp, looking exactly like he always had. Same height, same build, same scar on his chin from when we were 12 and he tried to jump his bike over a creek. Everything perfect, except for his eyes, which didn't quite track the same way they used to. "Alex?" I said, my voice coming out thin and strange. He stepped closer, and that's when I noticed his gait was slightly off. Not limping, but the rhythm was wrong, like he was thinking about each step instead of just walking. "Surprised to see me? I've been hiking all day, looking for you guys. How'd you know I'd be here?" That question stopped me cold. I hadn't told anyone where we were going except Emma, and Alex couldn't know because Alex was dead. "How are you here?" I asked. He laughed, and the sound was almost right. "Almost? What do you mean? We planned this trip months ago. Remember? You, me, Emma, Angel's Landing at sunrise." He gestured toward the tent where Emma was sleeping. "She's here, right? We had planned this trip back in December, before the accident, but we'd never actually booked it, never set dates. It was just one of those things you talk about doing someday." "Alex, you died," I said quietly. His head tilted too far to the side, like a bird examining something interesting. "What?" "No, man. I've been hiking. Got here about an hour ago. Set up camp over in Loop C. Saw your truck in the lot and figured I'd come say hi. I didn't drive a truck. I drove a Honda Civic. Alex knew that. Alex had ridden in that car 100 times. The thing that looked like Alex sat down across the fire pit from me, exactly where Alex would have Saturday. Same posture, same way of leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. But the fire had died to almost nothing, and I couldn't see his face clearly anymore. He looked tired, he said. "Grief's hard, isn't it?" The word grief hit me like a physical blow. Whatever this was knew about the funeral, knew I'd been mourning. "Alex died in a car accident in February," I said, more to myself than to him. "I was there. I saw the car. I spoke at the service." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's a strange thing to say about someone who's sitting right across from you." Emma stirred in the tent, and I realized I'd been talking louder than I thought. The thing that looked like Alex glanced toward the sound, then back at me. Should we wake her up? She'd want to see me. "No," I said quickly. Too quickly. He smiled, and in the dim red glow from the coals, I could see too many teeth. Not extra teeth, just all of them at once, like his mouth was wider than it should be. "You're not Alex," I said. "Of course I'm Alex. Who else would I be?" He stood up and brushed dirt off his pants with movements that were just slightly too precise. "I'm going to get some water. Want anything?" He walked toward the bathroom facilities, and I watched his silhouette move between the other campsites. Same height, same build, same red jacket, but the way he walked, it was like watching someone who had studied how Alex moved but never quite got it natural. I grabbed my phone and called Alex's number. I knew it was disconnected, had been since the accident. But I needed to hear that automated message, needed proof that he was gone. The phone rang. Once, twice, then Alex's voice answered. "Tyler? Where are you? I'm at the water spigot, but I don't see you." I hung up and stared at the phone. Alex's contact photo stared back at me, the same picture I'd used in his memorial slideshow. Emma unzipped the tent and poked her head out. "Who were you talking to?" "Nobody," I said. "Bad dream. Go back to sleep." She looked around the empty campsite, confused, then shrugged and zipped the tent back up. 5 minutes later, Alex came back. Same easy stride, same casual wave. "Water spigot's got good pressure. You should fill up before tomorrow's hike." "What hike?" I asked. "Angel's Landing. That's why we're here, right?" He sat back down and poked at the coals with a stick. "I've been looking forward to this for months. Ever since we planned it. We never actually planned it." "Sure we did. You called me in December, said you wanted to do something big for your birthday. I suggested Zion." He looked up at me, and his eyes reflected the coals like an animal's. "Don't you remember?" I did remember that conversation, but it had been with Emma, not Alex. And it was after the funeral, when I was trying to figure out how to move forward without my best friend. "Alex," I said carefully, "tell me about the accident." He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "What accident?" "The car accident. February 14th. You were driving home from work. I don't remember any accident." He tilted his head again, that bird-like motion. "Are you feeling all right? You've been saying strange things all night." A coyote howled somewhere up on the canyon rim, and Alex turned toward the sound with his whole body, not just his head. When he turned back, his movements were smoother, more fluid, like he was getting more comfortable in the body he was wearing. "I should probably get some sleep," I said. "Long hike tomorrow." "Good idea. I'll walk you to your tent." "That's okay. I'm fine." But he stood up anyway and walked with me the 10 steps to my tent. Emma had left the rain fly partially open, and in the faint light from my headlamp, I could see her sleeping peacefully inside. "She looks different," Alex said quietly. "Different how?" "Older. Sadder." He crouched down next to the tent opening. "Grief changes people, doesn't it?" I grabbed his shoulder to pull him back from the tent. The moment I touched him, I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't Alex. The shoulder felt wrong under the jacket, too narrow, too sharp, and cold, like he'd been outside in winter air. He looked down at my hand on his shoulder, then up at my face. "You okay, Tyler?" I let go and stepped back. "Yeah, just tired. Get some rest. We'll start early tomorrow." He walked away toward Loop C, hands in his pockets, whistling a tune I recognized but couldn't place. I crawled into the tent and lay awake until sunrise, listening for footsteps. Emma woke up around 6 and asked if I was ready for the hike. I told her I'd changed my mind. Maybe we could try a different trail. She was disappointed but didn't argue. We packed up and drove to the visitor center, where I asked to speak to the ranger who'd given us advice the day before. I described what had happened without mentioning my dead cousin specifically. Just said someone had come to our campsite claiming to know us, but something felt off. The ranger listened and asked if the person had offered to show us any shortcuts or alternate routes. I said no, but he'd seemed very interested in our hiking plans. The ranger nodded and made a note in his log. "We get reports like this every few months," he said. "Someone shows up at a campsite, claims to know the campers, asks detailed questions about their plans. Usually happens to people who are grieving or dealing with loss. Why? Hard to say. Could be someone who preys on vulnerable people. Could be something else." He looked at me directly. "Did this person know things they shouldn't have known?" "Yeah." "Then you did the right thing by not engaging." and by not waking your girlfriend." He handed me a card with an incident number. "If you experience any follow-up contact, call this number immediately." We drove back to Denver that afternoon. For 2 weeks, I got calls from Alex's old number at exactly 11 p.m. When I answered, I'd hear my own voice talking to someone I couldn't see, discussing hiking plans and asking about Emma. I finally blocked the number. Emma asked me about the calls, but I couldn't explain them without sounding like I was losing my mind. I just said someone had gotten hold of Alex's old phone and was playing pranks. She accepted that explanation because it was easier than the alternative. I still camp, but I research locations carefully now. I avoid places with spiritual significance or areas where people report unusual activity, and I never camp alone, especially not when I'm working through grief or processing loss. If something that looks like someone you've lost shows up at your campsite, don't engage. Don't let it study your reactions. Don't give it more information about the person it's trying to mimic. Just pack up and leave. Some things hunt people who are already wounded. They know exactly what face to wear to get you to lower your guard. The thing that visited me in Zion wasn't Alex, but it was getting better at pretending to be him with every minute I spent talking to it. Don't give him the practice. Some impersonations are too dangerous to encourage. We counted 7 figures standing at the tree line behind our family cabin, but there were only 5 people in our group. The cabin belonged to my Uncle Robert, tucked into a fold of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains about an hour north of Taos. He'd offered it to our family for a long weekend in October. Said we needed to get up there before the snow made the access road impassable. 5 of us made the trip. Me, my wife Lisa, our 2 kids, Emma and Sam, and my brother-in-law David. The cabin sits on maybe 20 acres of pine and aspen with a meadow that opens toward the mountains, remote enough that cell service cuts out completely once you leave the main highway. Uncle Robert had warned us about that, said it was part of the appeal. No distractions, just family time and mountain air. We arrived Friday afternoon and spent the evening getting settled. The kids explored the property while Lisa and I unpacked groceries. David got a fire going in the stone fireplace, and we grilled burgers on the deck as the sun set behind the ridge. Normal family vacation stuff. Emma found an old horseshoe behind the woodshed and claimed it for luck. Sam collected interesting rocks to take home. Saturday morning, Lisa noticed them first. She was making coffee in the kitchen, looking out the window toward the meadow, when she called me over. "Do you see those people at the edge of the trees?" I looked where she was pointing. Along the tree line, maybe 100 yards away, 4 figures stood perfectly still, facing the cabin. Too far to make out details, but clearly human shapes. They weren't moving, weren't waving, just watching. "Probably other hikers," I said. Public land backs up to Uncle Robert's property on 2 sides, but even as I said it, something felt off. The figures weren't dressed like hikers. No bright colors, no visible packs or gear, and they stood too still, like mannequins positioned at exact intervals along the tree line. David joined us at the window, coffee mug in hand. "How long have they been there?" "I just noticed them," Lisa said. "Maybe 5 minutes?" We watched for another few minutes, but they didn't move. David suggested we walk out and say hello, be neighborly. I was about to agree when Emma came running in from outside. "Dad, there's people watching the house from the woods. We see them, honey. Probably just other campers." "No, Dad, there's more now. Come look." We followed Emma outside onto the deck. She pointed toward the tree line, and my stomach dropped. Instead of 4 figures, there were now 6, all standing at different points along the edge of the forest, all facing our cabin, all perfectly motionless. "That's weird," David said quietly. Lisa counted them aloud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where did the other 2 come from? Sam came around the corner of the cabin. carrying his collection of rocks. Are those the people who were walking around the house last night? We all turned to look at him. What people? I asked. I heard footsteps on the deck around midnight. I looked out my window and saw people walking around outside, but they were walking really quiet, like they didn't want to wake anyone up. Lisa and I exchanged glances. We hadn't heard anything during the night, but Sam's bedroom faced the deck. How many people? David asked. I don't know. It was dark, but I heard them talking. What did they say? Sam shrugged. I couldn't understand the words. It sounded like when you're trying to copy someone talking but you don't know the language. A chill ran down my spine. I looked back at the tree line. The 6 figures hadn't moved, but now I could make out more details. They were all roughly the same height and build, wearing dark clothing that seemed to absorb the morning light rather than reflect it. I'm going to walk over there, David announced. Maybe we should all go together, Lisa suggested. No, I'll just see what they want. Could be they need directions, or have car trouble. David started across the meadow toward the tree line, and we watched from the deck. As he got closer to the figures, they began to move. Not away from him, but repositioning themselves, spreading out along the forest edge, maintaining their spacing but adjusting their positions like pieces on a chessboard. When David was about 50 yards away, he stopped walking and called out, "Hello, can I help you folks with something?" No response that we could hear. The figures just stood there, watching him the same way they'd been watching the cabin. David tried again, louder this time. "Are you lost? Do you need directions?" One of the figures raised its hand, not in greeting, but pointing past David, toward our cabin, toward us standing on the deck. That's when Emma grabbed my arm. "Dad, look." I followed her gaze and felt my blood turn cold. There was now a 7th figure, standing at the far end of the tree line, closer to the cabin than the others. But this one wasn't standing still. It was moving slowly along the forest edge, working its way around toward the side of the property. "David!" I shouted. "Come back!" He looked over his shoulder at me, then back at the figures. Even from that distance, I could see his body language change. His shoulders tensed, and he started walking backward toward the cabin, keeping the figures in sight. "Get inside," I told Lisa and the kids. "What about David?" "He's coming. Just get inside." We moved into the cabin, and I grabbed Uncle Robert's binoculars from the mantel. Through the lenses, I could see the figures more clearly, and what I saw made my hands shake. They looked like people from a distance, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too thin, with arms that hung just a little too long at their sides. And they moved in perfect unison when they moved at all, like a coordinated unit rather than individuals. David made it back to the deck, breathing hard. "Something's not right about them." "What do you mean?" I got close enough to see their faces. He paused, running his hand through his hair. "They all have the same face." Lisa stared at him. "The same face, not similar. The same. Like copies." He took the binoculars and looked toward the tree line again, and when I called out to them, they all tilted their heads at the exact same angle, at the exact same time. Through the window, we could see the 7th figure had stopped moving and now stood directly behind the cabin, just visible through the kitchen window. Lisa noticed it first and let out a small gasp. "There's one behind the house now." I looked out the back window. Sure enough, a figure stood at the edge of the clearing behind the cabin, maybe 30 yards away. Same height, same build, same dark clothing as the others. But this one was closer. Close enough that I could see its face clearly. It was my face, not similar to my face, not someone who looked like me. My exact face, down to the small scar on my chin and the way my hair parts on the left side. but the expression was wrong, blank and emotionless, like a photograph of me with all the personality drained out. "Lisa," I said quietly, "take the kids to the back bedroom and lock the door. What's wrong? Just do it. Please." She didn't argue. I heard her gathering Emma and Sam, their voices moving toward the back of the cabin. David stayed with me, still watching through the binoculars. "How many now?" I asked. He did a slow count, panning across the tree line. 8. No, wait. 9. They're spreading out around the entire property. I pulled out my phone, knowing there was no cell service, but checking anyway. Nothing. We were completely cut off. "What do you think they want?" David asked. Before I could answer, we heard Lisa's voice from the back bedroom, but it wasn't coming from inside the house. It was coming from outside, from the direction of the tree line. "Ben? David? Where are you? I'm scared." David and I looked at each other. Lisa was locked in the back bedroom with the kids. We could hear them moving around back there, talking quietly. The voice came again, closer this time. "Ben, please help me. Something's wrong." Perfect reproduction of Lisa's voice, down to the slight tremor she gets when she's frightened. But Lisa was safe inside the cabin. Then Emma's voice joined it, calling from somewhere near the front of the property. "Dad! Dad! Where are you?" And Sam's voice from another direction. "Help! Someone help me!" All three voices, calling from different points around the cabin, but all three of our family members were locked safely in the back bedroom. David grabbed my arm. "They're using our voices." Through the window, I could see the figures had moved closer. They now formed a rough circle around the cabin, maybe 20 yards out from the building, and they were all calling to us in voices we recognized. My own voice shouted from the front yard, "David, get out here. I found something." David's voice answered from near the woodshed. "Coming, Ben." "What is it?" Lisa's voice, closer now. "The kids are hurt. I need help." Emma, crying, "Daddy, I'm lost. I can't find you." Sam, panicked, "There's something in the woods. Help me." A chorus of our own voices, calling from every direction. Each one perfectly mimicked but somehow hollow, like recordings played through speakers hidden in the forest. I ran to the back bedroom and knocked on the door. "Lisa, it's me. How are you doing?" "We're okay," came her muffled reply from inside the room. "What's all that shouting outside?" "Don't listen to it. Whatever you hear, don't come out of that room until I tell you it's safe." I rejoined David at the front window. The figures had moved even closer, and now I could see that several of them wore faces I recognized. One looked exactly like David, another like Lisa, a third like Emma. "They're copying us," David said, "studying us." The voices continued calling from outside, but now they were having conversations with each other. I heard my own voice talking to Lisa's voice about going for a walk. David's voice suggested they all meet at the tree line to discuss something. Emma's voice asked if anyone wanted to play a game. It was like listening to a recording of our family, but with all the warmth and genuine emotion removed. The words were right, the inflections were right, but there was something fundamentally missing. Then the knocking started, gentle taps on the front door, followed by Lisa's voice. "Ben, I'm locked out. Can you let me in?" More knocking at the back door with Emma's voice. "Dad, why is the door locked? I want to come inside." Knocking at the windows, accompanied by Sam's voice. "Let me in, please. It's cold out here." And my own voice at the side door. "David, open up. I lost my keys." The knocking got more insistent, coming from all sides of the cabin now. Multiple versions of our voices pleading to be let in, each one sounding desperate and afraid. David checked his watch. "It's only 10 a.m. How long do we wait this out?" I didn't have an answer. The knocking continued, accompanied by increasingly frantic versions of our voices. They seemed to know exactly what to say to make us want to open the doors. Then Lisa's voice, sobbing, "Please, Ben, something's wrong with the kids. I need to get them to a hospital." Emma's voice screaming, "Daddy, help me! It hurts!" Sam's voice, terrified, "Don't let them take me. Please don't let them take me." Even knowing it wasn't real, hearing those voices in distress was almost unbearable. Every parental instinct screamed at me to throw open the doors and help, but I could hear the real Lisa and kids talking quietly in the back bedroom, safe and unharmed. The knocking stopped abruptly around noon. The voices faded. When I looked out the front window, the tree line was empty. No figures, no movement, just pine trees swaying in the mountain breeze. We waited another hour before I finally unlocked the back bedroom door. Lisa and the kids were playing cards on the bed, using Sam's collected rocks as poker chips. "Is it over?" Lisa asked. "I think so." We packed up in record time and drove straight back to Taos. I called Uncle Robert from the first gas station with cell service and told him what had happened, leaving out the more unbelievable details. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I should have warned you about that. The local Pueblo folks told me years ago that something lives in those woods, something that watches and learns. They said if it ever starts copying your family, you should leave immediately and not come back for at least a year. Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I thought they were just stories. I've never had problems up there myself." He paused. "But then again, I've never brought kids to the cabin. Maybe that made the difference." I asked him if other renters had reported similar experiences. A few families over the years, always the same story. Figures watching from the tree line, voices calling from the woods. I always figured they were just spooked by being so isolated. We never went back to the cabin. Uncle Robert sold the property the following spring to a developer who planned to subdivide it. I sometimes wonder if the new owners have any idea what they're building on. If you're ever staying in a remote location and you notice people watching your house from the forest, don't engage with them. Don't try to make contact. And if you start hearing your own voices calling from outside, whatever you do, don't open the doors. Some things need to study you up close to perfect their mimicry. Don't give them the opportunity. The versions of yourself that they create might be convincing enough to fool the people you love most. The jogger I kept passing on my week-long backpacking trip through Grand Canyon National Park knew things about me that I'd never told anyone, including my childhood nickname and the exact location of a scar hidden under my hiking shirt. I'd planned 7 days on the Tonto Trail, hiking from Hermit Creek to Indian Garden, camping at different sites each night, solo backpacking to work through some personal stuff after losing my job and ending a long relationship. The kind of solitude that forces you to face your problems without distractions. I started at Hermit's Rest on a Monday in early November, descended the Hermit Trail to the river, then headed east on the Tonto. The weather was perfect for hiking, clear skies, temperatures in the 60s during the day. I made camp the first night at Hermit Creek, about 7 miles in, and fell asleep to the sound of water over stone. Tuesday morning, I was breaking down camp around sunrise when I heard footsteps on the trail. A woman jogged into view, running at an easy pace, wearing standard trail running gear. She looked to be in her 30s, athletic build, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Nothing unusual about seeing a trail runner in the Grand Canyon, except for how far we were from any trailhead. She slowed to a walk when she saw me and smiled. "Morning. Beautiful day for it. Definitely. You running the whole Tonto? Just a section. I'm Tom, by the way." She stuck out her hand. The name caught me off guard. Tom is short for Thomas, my full name, but only my family calls me Tom. Everyone else knows me as Thomas. I'd been introducing myself as Thomas to other hikers for years. "How did you know?" "Know what?" She tilted her head, looking genuinely confused. "You said you were Tom. That's my name." She laughed. "No, I said I'm Pam. Must be the wind playing tricks, but I'd heard her clearly. She definitely said Tom. Right, sorry. I'm Thomas. Nice to meet you, Thomas. Enjoy your hike. She jogged away toward the east, and I finished packing. But as I shouldered my pack and started hiking, I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd known my nickname somehow. I hiked about 8 miles that day and made camp at Monument Creek. As I was setting up my tent around 5 p.m., I heard running footsteps again. The same woman jogged into my campsite, barely breathing hard despite having supposedly run at least 15 miles since I'd seen her that morning. Hey, Thomas, how's the hike going? This time she definitely used my full name. No confusion about what she'd said. Good. Thanks. You're covering a lot of ground today. I like to push myself. Mind if I ask where you're from? Denver. Great city. You still live in the apartment on Colfax near the hospital? I dropped the tent stake I'd been hammering. I'd lived on Colfax Avenue 3 years ago, in a studio apartment near Presbyterian Street Joseph Hospital, but I'd never mentioned that address to anyone I'd met hiking, and certainly not to a stranger I just met that morning. How do you know where I used to live? She looked confused again. Did I say something about where you live? I just asked where you were from. No, you specifically mentioned Colfax Avenue near the hospital. I think you misheard me. Maybe you're more tired than you thought. She started jogging in place. Well, I should get moving. Early start tomorrow. She ran off toward the west this time, back the way she'd supposedly come from. But if she was doing an out-and-back run, she should have been heading back east toward her starting point. That night, I lay in my tent thinking about the conversation. There was no way she could have known about my old apartment unless she'd researched me somehow. But why would a random trail runner go to that trouble? Wednesday morning, I was heating water for coffee when she appeared again, jogging out of the dawn light like she'd been running all night. Morning, Squirrel. Squirrel. That was my nickname when I was 8 years old, after I fell out of a tree and broke my arm. Only my immediate family knew about that name, and we'd stopped using it when I turned 10. What did you call me? Thomas? Same as yesterday. No, you called me Squirrel. She stopped jogging and put her hands on her hips, looking at me with concern. I think the altitude might be getting to you. Or maybe dehydration. You should drink more water. I know what I heard. Thomas. I've never heard that name before in my life. Are you feeling all right? But she was lying. I could see it in her eyes. A flicker of something that looked almost like amusement. Like she was enjoying a private joke. How many miles are you running today? I asked. Oh, just a few. I like to take it easy. She gestured vaguely toward the trail. See you around. She jogged away, and I noticed something I'd missed before. Her running shoes barely left any prints in the dust, as if she weighed almost nothing, and she moved with a rhythm that was just slightly off, like someone who'd learned to run by watching humans but had never quite mastered the natural cadence. That day I hiked harder than usual, trying to put distance between us. I wanted to reach Indian Garden by Thursday and catch the shuttle back up the South Rim, cutting my trip short by 2 days. Something about her was wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was following me rather than just happening to run the same trail. But Thursday morning, there she was again, sitting on a boulder near my campsite at Horn Creek, stretching her hamstrings like she'd been waiting for me to wake up. How's that scar on your shoulder healing up, Tom? I went cold. The scar was from a mountain biking accident 2 months earlier, a jagged cut from a broken branch that had gotten infected. It was hidden completely under my hiking shirt, and I hadn't told anyone about it except my doctor. How do you know about my scar? What scar? She looked at me with that same confused expression. You just asked about the scar on my shoulder. I asked how your shoulders were feeling. You know, from carrying that heavy pack. She stood up and started her pre-run stretching routine. You really miss hearing a lot of things, Thomas. Maybe you should consider heading back early. I am heading back early. Smart choice. The canyon can mess with your head if you spend too much time down here alone. She started jogging away, then stopped and looked back. Oh, and Tom? Be careful on the Bright Angel Trail. That section just below Indian Garden can be tricky with a full pack. She knew I was planning to take the Bright Angel Trail out. I hadn't mentioned that to anyone. Hadn't even decided for certain until that morning. I hiked fast that day, practically racing toward Indian Garden. Every few miles, I'd see her in my peripheral vision, jogging parallel to the trail through the brush and rocks. She never got close enough for conversation, but she was always there, keeping pace no matter how fast I walked. At Indian Garden, I set up camp for what I hoped would be my last night in the canyon. The campground was more populated than the backcountry sites I'd been using, with several other backpackers and a few rangers around. I felt safer with other people nearby. Around sunset, she jogged into the campground and stopped at the ranger station. I watched her talking to one of the rangers, gesturing in my direction. After a few minutes, the ranger walked over to my campsite. "Sir, are you Thomas Patterson?" "Yes. The woman over there says she's your sister and she's been worried about you. Says you were supposed to check in with family every day but haven't called." I looked toward the ranger station. The woman stood there smiling and waving, but she looked different now. Her hair was a different color, shorter. Her face had a different shape. She looked enough like my actual sister Kelly to be convincing from a distance, but I knew it wasn't her. "Officer, I don't have a sister with me on this trip. My sister lives in California and has never been to the Grand Canyon." The ranger looked confused. "She says her name is Kelly Patterson and she drove down from Flagstaff to meet you. Can you ask her to show you some ID?" The ranger walked back to the station and spoke with the woman again. She reached into her pocket, then shook her head and pointed toward the parking area, apparently claiming she'd left her wallet in her car. The ranger looked back at me, then at her, clearly uncertain. While they were talking, I pulled out my phone and showed the ranger a photo of my real sister Kelly from my contact list. Kelly has blonde hair and is about 6 inches shorter than the woman at the ranger station. "That's not the same person," the ranger said. When we looked back toward the station, the woman was gone. The ranger walked around the building, checked the parking area, and came back shaking his head. She just vanished. Didn't see where she went. I told him about my encounters with her over the past 4 days, how she'd known personal information about me that she shouldn't have known. The ranger listened carefully and made notes in a small notebook. "We've had reports like this before," he said finally. "Someone approaches hikers claiming to be a family member or friend, but the details don't add up. Usually happens to solo backpackers on the longer trails. What do you think it is?" "Hard to say. Could be someone with mental health issues. Could be a scam of some kind." He paused. "Could be something else. The Hopi and Navajo folks have stories about things that live in the canyon, things that watch people and learn to mimic them." That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside my tent made me think she was coming back. But morning came quietly, and I packed up before dawn and started the long climb up the Bright Angel Trail. I was about halfway to the south rim when I heard running footsteps behind me on the trail. I turned around and there she was, jogging up the steep switchbacks like they were flat ground, not even breathing hard. She looked exactly like me now. Same height, same build, same face, wearing identical hiking clothes to what I had on. The only difference was her eyes, which held that same amused expression I'd seen before. Beautiful morning for a hike, don't you think, Thomas? Hearing my own voice, my own inflection, coming from my own face was the most disturbing thing I'd ever experienced. "What are you?" "I'm you," she said in my voice. Or, "I'm getting better at being you. Practice makes perfect." "Why?" "Curiosity. You humans are so interesting. The way you carry all these private thoughts and memories. I like to collect them, try them on, see how they fit. She started jogging in place with my face, using my voice. "Did you know you talk in your sleep? You've been telling me stories all week. About your ex-girlfriend, Rachel. About losing your job at the engineering firm. About the time you stole $20 from your mother's purse when you were 12. Those were all things I'd never told anyone. Private shames and regrets that I'd been processing during the solitude of the hike. You've been listening to me sleep, among other things. You're very expressive when you think you're alone." Other hikers were coming down the trail now, early morning day hikers heading for Phantom Ranch. As they approached, she shifted her appearance back to the original form I'd first met, the female jogger with dark hair. "Don't worry," she said, back in her original voice. "I'm done with you now. I have what I need." "What does that mean?" "It means I can be Thomas Patterson from Denver, Colorado, whenever I want. I know your voice, your mannerisms, your memories, your secrets. I could call your family and they'd never know the difference." The thought made me sick. "You wouldn't." "Probably not. I prefer the wilderness to your cities. But it's nice to know I could, if I wanted to." She started jogging back down the trail, moving away from the approaching hikers. Just before she disappeared around a switchback, she called back in my own voice, "Thanks for the memories, Tom. Sweet dreams." I hiked the rest of the way out in a daze and drove straight home to Denver. For weeks afterward, I was paranoid about phone calls, convinced that thing might use my voice to contact my family or friends, but nothing happened. At least nothing I'm aware of. I still backpack, but never alone anymore, and never for more than 2 or 3 days at a time. I don't talk to myself on the trail anymore either, and I'm careful about what I think when I'm falling asleep in remote places. If you're planning a solo hiking trip in the Southwest, particularly in areas with spiritual significance to local tribes, be aware of who you encounter on the trail. If someone knows details about your life that you haven't shared, if they look different each time you see them, if they seem too interested in your personal stories and private thoughts, cut your trip short and get back to populated areas. Some things in the wilderness are patient hunters. They don't want to hurt you physically. They want something more valuable. Your identity, your voice, your memories. They want to become you so completely that even your closest family wouldn't know the difference. The scariest part isn't that something in the Grand Canyon can look like me and sound like me. The scariest part is that it knows me better than I know myself. And it's somewhere out there in the desert, carrying my face and my voice and my deepest secrets. If you ever get a call from Thomas Patterson from Denver, and something about the conversation feels just slightly wrong, hang up. It might not be me on the other end of the line. The voice that called my name from the bottom of Antelope Canyon wasn't human, but it sounded exactly like my father calling me home for dinner when I was 8 years old. I'd driven down from Salt Lake City to Page, Arizona in late March to photograph the Slot Canyon before the summer crowds made it impossible. The Navajo guide at the visitor center gave me the standard warnings about flash floods and staying with the group, then added something that made me pause. If you hear someone calling your name from the deep slots, don't answer. Don't even look. I smiled and nodded because you hear stories like that at every tourist spot in the Southwest, local folklore to add atmosphere. My plan was simple. Join the 11 a.m. tour, shoot some long exposure shots of the light beams, and drive back before dark. I'd been to Upper Antelope twice before, but this was my first time booking Lower Antelope. The entrance is just a crack in the ground that you rappel into with metal ladders. 20 feet down, the sandstone walls squeeze close enough to touch both sides with your arms spread. The tour group was small, 8 of us plus a guide named Tommy who'd been leading groups down there for 15 years. We descended single file, cameras ready, into that famous orange glow. The first chamber opened wide enough for everyone to spread out and set up shots. That's where I heard it the first time. "Tyler, dinner's ready." My father's voice, clear and familiar. echoing from deeper in the canyon where no one from our group had gone. The exact tone he used when I was a kid, and he wanted me to come inside but didn't want to yell. Patient but firm. I looked around. Everyone else was adjusting camera settings and talking about f-stops. Nobody else seemed to hear it. I told myself it was acoustics. Sound carries strangely in slot canyons. Someone from another tour group deeper in the system, maybe. But we were the only group scheduled for Lower Antelope until 2 p.m. Tommy led us through the next squeeze, a section where you have to turn sideways and shimmy between walls that barely let your shoulders through. The rock above blocks most of the sky, leaving just a ribbon of blue 40 feet up. In the dim amber light, I heard it again. Tyler, son, where are you? This time it was louder, clearer. It came from ahead of us, from a section of the canyon Tommy hadn't taken us to yet. My father lives in Utah. He doesn't even know I'm in Arizona, but that was his voice, no question. The same inflection he used when he was looking for me around the house. I stopped walking and listened. The guide noticed and asked if I was all right. I said the acoustics were playing tricks on me. He nodded and said that happens sometimes. Sound bounces off the walls in ways that make you think you're hearing things that aren't there. We moved through 2 more chambers, each one more spectacular than the last. Shafts of light cutting through the darkness, rock walls flowing like frozen water. I was getting the shots I came for, but I couldn't focus. Every few minutes, my father's voice would drift from somewhere ahead of us, or behind us, or from above, always just out of sight. Tyler, come here, son. Tyler, I need to talk to you. Where did you go? I've been looking everywhere. The worst part was how normal it sounded. Not echoing strangely, not distorted by distance or rock walls. Just my father's voice, as clear as if he were standing next to me. By the 4th or 5th time, I was scanning the narrow slots above us, thinking maybe someone was up there with a radio or playing some kind of prank. Tommy gathered us in the deepest chamber for the group photo. We lined up with our backs to the curved wall while he checked his camera settings. That's when I saw the footprints. In the sand at the base of the chamber, someone had walked a perfect circle around where we were standing. Bare feet, long toes, stride length that didn't match any of the boots our group was wearing. The prints were fresh, pressed into sand that showed every detail. But we'd been the first people down there that day. Tommy had unlocked the entrance himself. I pointed them out to Tommy. He crouched and studied them without saying anything. Then he stood and checked his watch. He said we needed to start heading back. Tour time was almost up. On the way out, the voice followed us. Not my father anymore. My mother, calling from somewhere in the maze of slots we hadn't explored. Tyler, honey, are you lost? Then my brother's voice. Tyler, what are you doing down there? Then my ex-girlfriend, Sarah, using the worried tone she'd use when I was late getting home. Tyler, please answer me. Each voice was perfect. Not close, not similar, exact. Down to the rhythm and the little catch in Sarah's voice when she was anxious. But none of these people knew where I was. Sarah and I hadn't spoken in 2 years. The guide moved faster now, herding us through the narrow sections without stopping for photos. He kept checking behind us, glancing into the side slots we passed. When someone asked why we were rushing, he said weather conditions were changing and we needed to get topside, but the sky above was clear blue. No clouds, no wind. At the final ladder, Tommy waited for everyone to climb up before following. I was the last one up, and as I reached for the top rung, I heard all the voices at once. My father, my mother, my brother, Sarah, and 2 other voices I recognized but couldn't place, all calling my name from different directions in the canyon below, not one at a time, all together, like a family reunion where everyone's trying to get my attention. Tyler! Tyler, where are you? Come back. The sound echoed up through the narrow opening and then cut off abruptly, like someone had closed a door. Tommy sealed the entrance with a metal grate and a padlock. His hand shook slightly as he worked the lock. When I asked if everything was all right, he said some days the canyon gets active. He didn't explain what that meant. I drove straight to the Navajo Nation Parks office in Page and asked to speak to someone about what we'd experienced. A woman named Rita listened without interrupting, then pulled out a thin folder and wrote down the date, time, and tour guide name. She asked if I had photos of the footprints. I did. She looked at them on my camera screen and nodded. She said they get reports like mine every few months. Always the same details. Voices of family members who aren't there. Bare footprints that appear in sealed sections of the canyon. The prints always show long toes and a stride that doesn't match normal human proportions. She said the word I was thinking but hadn't wanted to say out loud. Skinwalker. She said they're drawn to the slot canyons because the narrow spaces confuse sound and make it easy to hide, and because they like to study people in enclosed areas where there's only one way out. I asked what I was supposed to do with that information. She said I'd done the right thing by not answering the voices and by reporting it. She gave me a card with the incident number and said to call if I experienced any follow-up activity. I drove back to Salt Lake City that afternoon instead of spending the night in Page like I'd planned. For 3 weeks after, I'd get phone calls from numbers I didn't recognize. When I answered, I'd hear my own voice saying, "Hello?" Back to me, followed by silence and then a dial tone. The call stopped after I changed my number, but I still checked the caller ID twice before answering unknown calls, and I've never gone back to any slot canyon, upper or lower. If you're planning to visit Antelope Canyon or any of the other slot canyons around Page, go with a group. Stay with your guide. And if you hear someone calling your name from the deep slots, remember what the guide told me. Don't answer. Don't even look. The canyon has been there for thousands of years. Whatever lives in those narrow places between the walls has been there just as long. It knows how to use your voice better than you do. It knows exactly what to say to make you come looking. Don't give it the chance to practice on someone else you love. Some echoes aren't worth chasing.